Welcome to this video about implementing custom Azure AD secured APIs for Viva Connections adaptive card extensions. I'm Paolo Pialorsi and I'm a proud member of the Microsoft 365 PMP team. This is the third episode of a series of 4 videos about how to create adaptive card extensions being able to consume a backend multi-tenant API. And in this video, we focus on the backend API implementation. First of all, from a hosting point of view, you can host the backend API in an Azure Function app, which is, generally speaking, easier and better than hosting the solution in an ASP.NET Core API website on Azure, because you can leverage the consumption mode of Function apps, which scales really well and costs less than a hosted web application. From a multi-tenancy requirement point of view, you will have to configure your API to support custom permission scopes, and you will have to implement your own custom logic for authentication and authorization. From a technical implementation point of view, you will leverage dependency injection inside the Function app, as well as you will rely on the Microsoft.identity.web package in order to have an easy authentication for access tokens that you will get in your Function app requests. Last but not least, we can use the preview capability of function filters to check the permission scopes in requests that we will get on the API side. So, let me move to the demo environment and let me show you the actual implementation of a sample multi-tenant backend API for adaptive card extensions. So here we have the Visual Studio solution for the backend API, which is implemented as an Azure function. And first of all, let's have a look to the packages that we are referencing in this solution, and specifically to the Microsoft.identity.web and the Microsoft.net.sdk functions and the Azure Function Extensions one. Then this is a function app configured to use dependency injection, and as such in the startup.cs file we define this to be the function startup, and we have the configure method where we configure the authentication using the add authentication core method targeting the service collection right here in the service builder. We specify that we want to configure authentication using the JWT bearer token authentication, because we are going to use open authorization and access tokens released by Azure Active Directory to authenticate and authorize the consumptions of our API. And then we also say that we want to add Microsoft Identity Web API authentication to our solution. And by doing that, we also specify the configuration to rely on, which will be the configuration of the Azure function in the published function on Azure. And right now, in my local solution, will be the local.settings.json file, where I specified the instance of Azure Active Directory that I want to use, which is the general one, the ID of the tenant where I registered the multi-tenant application, the client ID of the application that I registered as a multi-tenant app, and the audience, which will be the unique URI of the application that I will register in Azure AD. And all of these topics will be covered in much more detail in the next episode number 4. Then we also configure still in the startup CS that from a JWT bearer options we want to have the issuer validation, and right now, for the sake of simplicity, we validate every issuer, but in a real scenario you should have a table of trusted tenants that you want your solution to be provided to. So for example, if you sell a solution as a multi-tenant API, most likely you will have a list of all of the tenants who have a subscription, a valid subscription to consume your API, and when you will get a token issued by any tenant, you will have to validate if that tenant, that issuer, is in the list of customers with an active subscription. Again, just for the sake of simplicity, here we simply reply with the same issue that we've got to say that every subscription will be good, every issuer will be good. Then we have the actual functions in the function app. And here we have an orders function class where we define all of the functions which will become actions provided by the API. For example, the getOrders1 is a function named getOrders, which will be available as a get with the orders root, and inside that one we simply get the orders for the current user using some plumbing logic inside the function to generate a random list of orders for the currently consuming user. What is important right now is this attribute function authorize, which is a custom one that I created, and you can see there is a message. It is not really deprecated, but it is just because it relies on a functionality which is still under preview, and as such we have to see this highlighted information. Now we declare here with this attribute that in order to consume the getOrders method, we can either have the orders.read permission scope or the orders.fullControl permission scope in the access token provided to the API when consuming it. And thanks to this attribute, the function authorize attribute, which relies on the function filters functionality, which is still under preview, I can say that whenever we execute a request, so on executing async, I'm overriding this method from the base class, and I can say, okay, first of all, let's try to get the context, the HTTP context of the request. Once I've got it, let me first of all authenticate the access token that will be injected in the request, in the authorization header of the request. And I rely on the Microsoft.identity web package to do that, so that I will simply make this method call and the validation will happen under the cover based on the configuration settings that I defined right here. Then, once I've validated a successful request from a valid access token, I can get in the context the user, which will impersonate the user defined in the access token that I will receive, and I can search for the scopes. If I have scopes configured in my attribute and if I have a valid identity for a claims identity in the claims principal of the current request, I can search for the scope claim, so for the permission scopes defined in the access token, and if there is any of the required permissions, like for example in this scenario orders.read or orders.fullControl, well, we can authorize the access to the request. Otherwise, we will say that this is not a valid request. It is an unauthorized request. And if it is an unauthorized one, we will simply reply back with a 403 HTTP status, meaning that the access is forbidden. So, again, really simple and easy. From a function point of view, you simply rely on the attribute and you configure in the startup with dependency injection all the authentication pipeline to have open authorization in place. Here you can find a list of useful resources, like for example the source code of the PMP Contoso orders end-to-end reference solution that we are using in this series of videos, as well as an overview of Viva Connections extensibility and a tutorial about how to build your first SharePoint adaptive card extension. That's it. Thank you for watching this video, and let's see you in the final episode of this series.